Hello again. The Hangout cut out. This seems to be like a bug going on with Google because we were on a Hangout earlier on in the week, a Friends for Who Hangout, time flight commentary, which is fun. Go check it out, or we get to see us suffer for an hour. And it stopped at exactly the same time as that Hangout, so I think Google's got a bug. But in this part, we'll be looking at the spin-offs and a couple of Fourth Doctor stuff. And I'm going to kick off with the Companion Chronicle Home Truths, which is the start of the Sarah Kingdom trilogy, which I think is fantastic, which I've recently reviewed, so check out my full thoughts on that. But I think that it's a clever way how it continues Sarah. I think that, again, it uses traditional horror stuff, the isolation, the Doctor, Stephen, and Sarah can't get out. They're very much trapped in this house. What can have your every desire can make it become true. It's definitely an interesting idea, which leads to some creepy bits within it. So yeah, it's definitely a good story. It sort of reminds me of The Woman in Black, the sort of house of it, the House of Eel and Eelmarsh House. So yeah, it's a very good story, very eerie with this sort of breathing what brushes across, and you definitely get a chill on your spine when you listen to it. And it's a fantastic strip by Simon Gurrier.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, I'd say yeah, it's a very tense story. I'd say it builds up the atmosphere quite well. Again, very claustrophobic, just being set in this one house, and it's essentially Doctor Who's take on a haunted house story in a way. There's always an explanation behind it, but it doesn't make it any less creepy. And by the end, even though you understand what's going on, it's still creepy no matter what. I'd say this is definitely brilliantly read by Jean Marsh. She does a great job of kind of conveying the kind of creepy atmosphere of the story and the kind of claustrophobic nature of it really well. And she does a great she does great voices for the Doctor and Stephen. And actually, it kind of enhances the effect of this audio even more. Like you imagine this story in black and white, because I can't help but imagine Hartnell and his companions being in black and white, even though I can imagine in colour. It just adds to this effect really of it being in black and white, and adds to the kind of creepy nature of this, and when they discover like a body in this house when they first arrive. Also, the framing device for this story is really creepy, with Sarah being in this house, being met by a visitor called Robert. And by the end, you do get a very close idea of what this story really is, and just the sound design for the framing device is done really exceptionally well. And I'm so glad they put Gene March back to do this. And Simon Gurrier has written a really tense, atmospheric, and well dialogue script. So brilliant job here for this story. I give it an 8 out of 10.
I just want to add that I think the imagery the story creates with sort of what happened in it. You can easily imagine Hartnell clutching his lapels going around this eerie, sort of creepy house. And I think that the sound design just enhances you with, the rain dripping on the tiles and this sort of eerie breath going around. The sound design just makes the atmosphere. It's very psychological. It's not scary as in jump scares. It's very psychological. It messes with your head with this house, with stuff going on in this house. Tom?
Well, it's Simon Gurrier, and he's probably one of my favourite Big Finish writers. He's up there with, good old Johnny Morris and John Dorney. The Oliver Harper trilogy was absolutely remarkable, and I've been a little bit, which one's going to be better, the Sarah Kingdom trilogy or the Oliver Harper trilogy? And when I listened to this one, it just blew my bloody socks off. I absolutely love it. Horror is just my bread and butter. I love it so much. And this one, yes, but as Ben said, it's not, psychological. It messes with the characters and it toys with them, tricks them. So definitely like it for that. And that breathing in the background, it happened in a part of the story which I wasn't expecting. Just a very creepy, loud breath, and it is very creepy stuff. It is. Yeah, Simon Gurrier did very well with this story, messing around with the characters. Quite interesting with the Doctor and Sarah. I remember some interesting interactions with them. As the first Doctor, he's stubborn. He never likes to be wrong. Like in the Daleks, for example, you can see him. He just hates he's wrong, and just some interesting interactions and dialogue between the two. And Sarah Kingdom, Jean Marsh is reads this splendid, and does a great job with Stephen and the Doctor. So a lot more better this to say like Sarah Sutter, for example, in The Dark Knight reads it rather just bland and just sounds the same, whereas G. Mars really puts a lot of effort in it, so I like that. And a very nice twist as well, so definitely get this one as a horror treat, and I'm looking forward to the other two in the trilogy. This will be the best, I reckon. Still, I'm gonna hope that the Drowned Worlds and Guardian of the Solar System will be good also, but this is horror, my bread and butter, so of course I'm gonna love it, and I'm guess it's gonna be the best. I would go all the way and give this a perfect rating.
Oh, bloody hell.
Anyone else?
And that's me on Home Truths.
Any comments?
Bloody buy the story is my comment.
Okay.
That's a good one. So now we're going to move off Doctor Who for now. We're going to look at the spin-offs because they're a big part of Big Finish as much as Doctor Who. So we're going to start off with Dorian Gray, which is Kai and James's territory.
Yay!
And talk about the sexiness of Dorian.
Okay. Well, James, do you want to start because you've been containing yourself all this time? So you can start with Mr. Gray.
Well, I think in this one we're just going to be covering the first one, This World Our Hell. And to me, that is the creepiest out of the Dorian lot for Series 1. And with this series, it really does set a tone for who Dorian is, and it doesn't confuse the viewer. It gives a clear explanation at the beginning, and makes Dorian even just a fully rounded character, even in the first one. He is an intelligent individual. He isn't just all about sex and drugs like the book seems to present. Now, he can see the beauty in things, which is why I think Paris is the perfect setting for This World Our Hell, as the beauty of it all and the tone of the actual, that's creeping me out with the Dorian slowly just coming into Kaijio.
Look at the sexiness.
Oh, I think the tone and the environment sort of they contradict each other yet contrast so well because it just makes them fit together so well. Of course, the Dorian series, they're very short, which they are worth £2.50, I would say, for download. £30 for the Series 1 to 2 box set, and I really recommend getting that. The creepiest moment in this is, of course, at the end when Dorian is in his bed. As what I love about the Dorian series, it will take just normal little pet things and turn them into something horrific, as in this it's the wallpaper moving. In the dark, it is possible to actually maybe make out images and maybe see the wallpaper moving, and I think that is just really good, as it's a very real world story. It isn't something completely out of context, and just overall just works incredibly well on audio.
Yep, I'd agree with that. That's great. I say, well, James, you've done a great review of that, so I don't need to add anything more. The only thing I will add is the best place to start in the case of this series is at the beginning, and This World Our Hell being the first episode, as James said, sets up the character brilliantly, sets up the tone of the series, sets up exactly what the series is going to be about, and does that in half an hour brilliantly. Something James didn't mention is that the idea of this world is that the idea of the character of Dorian Gray in this universe is he is the character that inspired Oscar Wilde to write his novel. So in this universe, the picture of Dorian Gray is a real novel, but this real man, actually inspired the character to be created. And in the first episode, Dorian meets Oscar Wilde on his deathbed. And that's probably one of my favourite scenes still out of the entire series, just the interaction between Dorian and Oscar Wilde in that scene, especially when they're talking about the wallpaper. And as James said, that scene with Dorian in bed listening to the wallpaper is just so creepy, and especially listen to this at night when you're in your own bed just before you go to sleep, because you can really kind of empathise with Dorian then, and you really do get sucked into the story. I mean, I will talk about the series in general. Dorian is Alexander Vlahos is a fantastic reader. He does some great narration for the series, and he plays Dorian to perfection. And the character is so well written, and it's so great that Vlahos gets such colourful golden dialogue to say. But I think in terms of the actual series itself, The Confessions of Dorian Gray isn't solely a horror series. Some episodes do vary tonally. I mean, the series is marketed as kind of horror, supernatural. in some episodes romantic, some episodes quite dramatic, and then there are some quite fun, rompish comedy episodes. Like a fun episode is Murder on 31st Street in Series 2. That's a good example. A romance one being the iconic The Heart That Lives Alone, which is, among Dorian fans, is one of the most popular stories back in Series 1. The series finale for Series 1, The Fallen King of Britain, is a fantastic drama written by Joseph Lidster. A really good adventure story is Ghost of Christmas Past, which is a crossover with Nicholas Briggs playing Sherlock Holmes. And Series 3 feels more like an urban thriller or an urban supernatural series. So all the stories vary tonally, but the stories themselves are just, most of them are saying really brilliantly written and really well performed. I mean, they are mainly character stories, and the character that drives them all is Alexander Blahos as Dorian Gray, and it's mainly how the supporting cast interact with him, but he is the mainstay of the series. And I've gone on about Dorian before, but honestly, if you've not tried it, you need to listen to it. I mean, there's some free episodes now. There's the first episode of Series 4, which is going out for free now, so I'd recommend you get that. And just buy the first series. It's only $2.99 each. And if you don't want to do that, buy the first episode for $2.99. Come on. Honestly, you will not be disappointed. You must get this series. And then just a quick thing, the first time Dorian appeared in the kind of pilot is in a crossover with Bernie Summerfield called Shades of Grey, which I've also reviewed, I will add. But yeah, that's a good kind of really kind of creepy horror anthology story in the same kind of way of Amicus films in a way, because there are 3 separate strands of story, with the Bernie Summerfield adventure being the framing device, but Alexander Blahos stars in that in 3 very creepy adventures. So I'd recommend you get that story if you want to get a real taste of Dorian without necessarily having to buy it. But if you like Doctor Who and Bernie Summerfield, I recommend you get that story. So that's all from me on Dorian Gray. Utterly brilliant.
So what would you say is the best series of Dorian you've experienced then, for the both of you?
I'd say still Series 1 for me. I think there's still the solid stories. I mean, there's some really great, colourful stories in Series 2. And Series 3 is good as well. It's just, it's all set in present day. And I do like the kind of historical period settings. And Series 1 does a great job of varying the settings a lot more until we get to modern day. So Series 1 is still the best series in my opinion.
Would you say as it moves through time it loses its sort of creepy element? As it's in the past, it has more of a creepy feel to it. So like Jagan Life in the Victorian era works brilliantly in that era because it is Victorian. If it was in present day, it wouldn't have the same effect. So would you say that's the same for Dorian?
Well, no, actually, because I think it uses the modern setting really well. I mean, The Fallen King of Britain does feel like a creepy story at times because it uses quite well, James knows what I'm talking about. The kind of villain of the piece is very modern in a way, or kind of it's based on narcotics, and you can't really do that in a Victorian setting. But the kind of story itself is influenced by the time it's set in. It's not incidental. So the urban setting is made really creepy because it's written for Dorian. So I think it's the actual the story itself that makes it creepy, rather than the setting being influenced by the horror. So. And in fairness, so it's really well achieved. I mean, another story I can mention is The Needle, which is set in like a big cosmopolitan skyscraper. And yet they still make it really creepy with the idea of plague doctors and ghosts stalking around. So they do use the modern setting to a great effect in a way for horror purposes.
So like urban thrillers, that sort of thing.
What was that, sorry?
So like urban thrillers, that sort of thing.
In a way, yeah, kind of urban thrillers / horrors in a way.
I find the modern setting to be quite refreshing and sort of breaks the series up a little. As if it's in the past, it's just going to be Dorian, talking to the owner of a B&B or a hotel, like he does in This World Our Hell. And in the Fallen King of Britain, you just hear nightclubs going on, and it's just quite refreshing and keeps the series new a little, and also makes it a bit more relatable. As you know, they mentioned Tesco's in the Fallen King of Britain, so it just adds a bit of comedy as well.
Yeah, definitely a very varied tonal series. So there's definitely going to be at least one story in Series 1 that you like. Anything else?
Is that Dorian covered for you, chaps?
If anyone else wants to, I'm covered with that.
Anything to add?
Well, the only thing I'm going to add is I'm definitely going to pick up Dorian.
Good.
I definitely do plan on getting Dorian eventually.
We all want Dorian. We all want you,
Look
Dorian.
at that sexy face. How can you say no to that?
I mean, the
We will
book
Master if you don't get it.
The Guild
I'm not
is-
a big Finish fan because I don't have Dorian Gray.
Yeah.
I've got one of his stories, sort of.
What one?
No.
And the one from World's Big Finish.
Yeah.
Oh, the three
yeah.
one.
Yeah, it's a good story. In the world's a big finish. So that's a good sample. Actually, I didn't think about that. That's a good sample story as well. If you get the world's a big finish, you want to try these different ranges. That's a good one from him, Mr. Dorian Gray. And if you get this box, you get 10 discs of Dorian's sexiness, with 3 specials and 10 half-hour episodes.
Well, that's nice.
Which 10 discs for 30 quid? Very
That's worth your money. Are they like
That's
hot?
damn good.
It isn't just series 1 and 2, it's all the it's all the ones in between that, and there's quite a few
Yeah.
sort of in between ones.
Yeah.
So it's a big value for money, and the box, it does look really nice, and I hope to get it for my birthday. So
Yeah.
Does it have that Beneath Summerfield one with Dorian Gray?
It does, yes, right at the back. Whereas with them Shades of Grey, you do need to get it as part of the Legion box set. But with this one, it's just the Shades of Grey on its own right at the back.
Right.
To have written such a book was nothing. To be
And the
the
information
world.
there by Casterbrus.
What, sorry?
And the information there by Kai.
Oh, yes. Enjoy. Use it as you will. Come to the Dorian side, people. Come on.
I'm sure we all will at some point, and
We all will come to the Dorians.
We all will.
You can't resist his magnetic eyes.
You can't actually.
We can't. Piercing eyes.
So, yes. What next, chaps? Do you want to go, Tom?
Yeah, Tom, go for Jago and Lightfoot.
Oh, Jago and Lightfoot. Oh. Such a fantastic series, and right now my favourite spin-off, I haven't really dived anything like Gallifrey or Countermeasures. They're probably good as well, but I've been falling in love with Jago and Lightfoot. I've just been on a roll. When I ordered a series 2, I fell in love, and I wanted to get series 3 and onwards, being really addicted. And yeah, get series 1 right now because it's £20, £5 per story. You can't really say no to that, so get that. But I'm talking about series 2 because I find all the stories pretty creepy in their own way, especially the man who steals the show, which is the amazing David Collins, who plays Gabriel Sanders. And truly, he's got a voice for audio. He's very, very sinister, and he really showcases his sinister side and also quite devious as well in Lightfoot and Sanders. Especially, he's very devious when he's with this character called Mags and really toying with her. That she's like blind, but Gabriel Sanders like toys with her a little bit and tricks her. And some fantastic dialogue in that one. He's just a really creepy and brilliant character, and he's the highlight for me in series 2 of Jago and Lightfoot. Also, and Justin Richards is very creative and clever when writing Jago and Lightfoot. Looks at their strengths with their characters, and yeah, does something quite nice within in this audio as well, which leads into the end. So yeah, Lightfoot and Sanders is just a fantastic story, and yeah, it's just, you fall in love with the good old David Collins. And the next one, which I forgot the name of, the Necropolis Express, which is by Mark Morris, who doesn't do a lot of Big Finish. He's been mostly with the books. And what this story actually did, it wasn't what I expected. I thought it was going to be a rather base under siege story. It was like zombies attacking a train, and it's rather base under siege and trapped. But what it actually was, it was really good and very creepy atmosphere with these like zombie creatures walking about, and a very low cast list that had I'm gonna have to have a look. It really just had Jago Lightfoot and someone named Reuben Maud. We get quite some interesting stuff about his character and some interesting things with Lightfoot and him during the end as well. And it gets pretty gruesome as well. And I'm not gonna say what Ellie's up to in this set. It's something you should experience for yourself, I would say. But yeah, definitely what this story, the set does very well is building up Gabriel Sanders, because he was big in Lightfoot and Sanders. Something happened in that story, and now he's been builded up quite a lot in Necropolis Express and the Theatre of Dreams, just getting little bits, and then you'll be right into the end story with the Ruvian inheritance, or yeah, that's what the name is. And the next story, that's actually Lightfoot and Sanders. The next story is Theatre of Dreams by Jonathan Morris, which I would say is a very clever story, very psychological again, just like Home Truths really tricks and messes with the characters that they're on the reality on this stage, and really like that. I do find it creepy where Lightfoot sees something where you can see himself in the past, if I can remember correctly. And yeah, it's a very clever story. It just goes to show that Jonathan Morris is very experimental, and the Ruvian inheritance, which I would say is a good end to the series. I wouldn't say it's my favourite, like say Jacob and Lightfoot's story, but it's a good send off. We get the full picture of the brilliance of Gabriel Sanders, and sets up series 3 very well with I just fall in love with that cliffhanger because it shows a fantastic character, and you should all know who it is. And yeah, sets up series 3 rather well, and series 2 is I would say it's my favourite series so far. It's just absolutely brilliant. And I'll probably
agree with that.
Yeah, I'll probably review it sometime. I will, in the near future. And with Series 3, it's not creepy or gothic or anything like Series 2. That's probably why I love Series 2 so much, because it takes more of a creepy approach. But my two creepy stories in Series 3 is The Man at the End of the Garden. It's a very odd story, which I did bring up before. Yeah, it's very different from any other Jacob and Lightfoot story. I find it quite similar, even though I haven't listened to this audio. 1,000 Tiny Wings, because it has killer crows in this one, attacking you, and they're trapped within the house. So I find it quite similar to 1,000 Tiny Wings, and it's feeling quite under siege in this house. And some nice twists, very supernatural. This book reading, and it's like a true story. I'm not going to go too depth in that one, but I really do like this one. And then Swan Song, which is John Dorney entering the equation for Jacob and Lightfoot, and you should all know he is a magnificent writer. And I would say it's just got really creepy sound design, feeling very trapped as well. But it's a very it's got a lot of time in this story. Where I'm not going to go too much in depth with this one, but it's another time, somewhere in 2011, and right here where they interlink into each other. But yeah, I find it creepy in some places with this voice Jago is hearing. Yeah, it's a creepy story, but yeah, Series 2 is definitely the highlight for what I'm saying here. It's definitely the creepiest so far of Jacob and Lightfoot. And yeah, that's my talk about Jacob and Lightfoot. That's enough from me. But yeah, definitely check out the range and pick up Series 2. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a range I'm thinking about getting. I almost did buy it on Tuesday. I had a choice between the first series or Unit Extinction, and I went for Unit Extinction instead.
Would you name it a dud series?
What was that, James?
Would you say there's maybe a dud series that the 35 quid a box set, minus the first one? So would you say there's maybe a series that you'd avoid?
Oh, because of the price then?
No, I mean, is the one that just doesn't live up to expectations, is just a bit crap or a bit mediocre?
Oh, right, I see what. Alright, I know what you mean. Well, no, not really. All the box sets have been really good so far. Mind you, I only listened to Series 1 to 3 right now. And I wouldn't really say none of them have been underwhelming. They are well worth your money. So yeah, nothing underwhelming so far.
I can say, having listened up to Series 5, I can say there's not a dud. Maybe 35 quid is a bit pricey, because I got them cheaper on eBay, I will admit. But I'd say there's not a dud series that you need to miss, to be honest. They each kind of bleed into each other into some way at the end of each series. So there's not really one you can skip, if I'm honest, or there's not really one that you think, oh, I'm not going to buy one. But they're all top quality stories, up to Series 5 as far as I'm aware anyway.
If somebody said to you, the series just dilutes the talons of Wing Chiang, with Jacob and Lightfoot in the series, facing all of these foes and even supernatural ones and taking them down, do you think it maybe affects what the characters originally were in the Towns of Wenchang, because they even encounter Magnus Greel again, and they wouldn't stand a chance in the Towns of Wenchang if the Doctor wasn't there.
Well, you could argue that. Well, would you say Sarah Jane was diluted by the fact that she travelled with the Doctor, or would you say that any of the companions were diluted by the fact they travelled with the Doctor? Yes, they didn't travel with the Doctor, but you could tell that Talons was kind of a springboard into their new life in a way, like school reunion, springboard Sarah Jane back into a life in the Sarah Jane Adventures, and the Captain Jack travelling with the Doctor springboarded his adventures into Torchwood. So in a way, the Doctor coming into their life did introduce all this kind of supernatural stuff into it. Like, it basically peeled away the kind of film around the world, and the Doctor basically showed them the real world, and the real world is full of monsters and creatures. And in the end, Talons of Wing Chiang actually brought them together and formed this great friendship. So I wouldn't say it dilutes Talons of Wing Chiang, and anyone who says it does obviously hasn't heard the Jago and Lightfoot series, because for anything, it really enhances the relationship a lot more having Jago and Lightfoot series there.
All said.
Anything else, anyone?
I think that's it for Jago and Lightfoot, I suppose.
You did say you were interested in Series 1, Ben.
I am interested in getting it. It is a range. I've been toying with the idea, but I need to get Mahogany Murderers, because I think, isn't it, the villain in Mahogany Murderers
The
linked?
pilot episode.
Yeah, it is the pilot that kind of needs Series 1. Yeah, you do need that one.
Do you think that they've maybe gone a little over the top? But we've got about we're on Series 10 now. Do you think maybe it should have been like a 5-box set series?
No.
No, because in the end, they're still making really good stories, from what I can tell from the reviews. So why would you stop? If you're still making good, fun adventures, you don't really need to stop it.
Yeah.
Unless you're doing stuff like Doctor Who that constantly needs to change. Whereas Jago and Lightfoot, they inhabit their own little bubble in the Victorian times where they can have just fun adventures whenever they like.
I think it was Trevor Baxter said to Jason O'Gallagher, he said if they stop making Jago and Lightfoot, then he'd die.
Yeah.
They'll keep making
Okay.
Trevor Baxter saying, if you stop doing this, I will just die because we've got nothing else left.
It's like blackmailing them, really, isn't it?
I'd love to meet Trevor Baxter because he seems to have such a wry sense of humour. He says, Colin Baker has this little anecdote where he says he was in studio with them. And he says, why does he get a taxi? And then Trevor Baxter says, it's either going to be a taxi or a hearse.
It sounds like it's got like a sort of morbid humour.
I quite like that.
I mean, Tom's gone quite morbid in his old age with his humour. You listen to Tom at 80, but he's calculated how many days he's lived for, and that is quite morbid when you think about it.
Yeah, I suppose when you get older, you do get quite morbid, though.
Yeah, I suppose it is.
So anyway, next one. What is the next one, actually?
I sort of want to talk about Sherlock for a bit, because this is the first time I've experienced it today.
Ah, yes.
I've fallen in love with it. I mean, it's a range I'm probably going to continue looking at, because it's Holmes versus Dracula. What more do you want? I mean, Nicholas Briggs, I have to say, is a fantastic sort of Holmes. Richard Earle, I just find him a quirky little Watson to go side this quite brash Nicholas Briggs's Sherlock Holmes. With this story, it's sort of a sequel, as Kai said, to The Hounds of Baskerville, because it sort of has the villain from the Hounds the way the story works from part one, from what I've listened to, is that you get a little inkling of the vampire undertone, with it mentioning Van Helsing, and then it continues where Hounds of Baskerville left off, and then you go back to the vampire plot afterwards, and it's quite interesting because the atmosphere, I will say, is fantastic. I will say this for the Jago and Lightfoot stuff. It just grabs you with sort of this mist and fog all around London, and things lurking in the shadow. I think that's very strong imagery, and this audio creates strong imagery with Richard Earle narrating, and really does set the tone of the story. With this sort of fog landscape with these sort of angelical beings sort of in the mist, beckoning people and ripping people's throats. It's very much horror. I mean, this is just part one. I'm yet to listen to part two, and in part two is where I presume they go off to Transylvania to Count Castle Dracula. So it's very much a fantastic story from part one, and I cannot wait to continue this because I think it's only going to get more horrific as the story progresses.
I
If
would
I
say,
just-
yes, it does get a lot more horrific as you go through. And you kind of come back more to the sequel to The Hound of the Baskervilles in a way, and the villain does return. So yeah, so the sequel nature does come back, but it gets a lot more horrific after part one.
That does really intrigue me. That does. When it gets more and more as it goes along, more horrific and creepy. Because I just love that sort of stuff. And what you said, Ben, are very similar to Jago and Life because I love that range. There's another reason why it intrigues me. With the mist around, it just sounds brilliant atmosphere. So yeah, I get it's another range which I'm looking into. Sherlock Holmes. Maybe I'll get it eventually because the Tangled Scheme definitely intrigues me of reviewers.
I think you definitely like it, Tom, because it does get quite bloody in part two, and it does make me think a lot of the kind of blood effects of Hammer horror films, as particularly Dracula and the Dracula sequels with Christopher Lee in them.
Yeah, it does sound like it's up my alley. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the things about these Sherlock ones is that this is an original Big Finish story because obviously they've adapted some of the novels. So the ones what Big Finish, their original stories are the ones what intrigues me, like Holmes and the Ripper. That sounds like another horrific one because Jack the Ripper is quite a prolific thing and quite iconic to the Victorian era. And that's what we think of London, Jack the Ripper stalking, the fog and sort of streets of London. So I think that should be a very atmospheric one to listen to, and I think that this story is very much a world builder, really.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah. What next, folks?
Should we move on to Tom Baker then quickly?
Yep, sure.
Tom, do you want to start?
Yeah, I might as well. I'll talk quickly about The Crooked Man first, which is it's got interesting reviews from Big Finish listeners. It's definitely very weird, it is, especially in episode 2. It takes a very different direction. It's part when it feels quite creepy of the Crooked Man, like watching you from a distance and stalking. It's got a very creepy feeling, depends how you imagine it, and stalking you from the background. Yeah, like that. It's got some nice sound design from what I remember when you can hear it like breathing really quietly in the distance. So like that little effect. And I can't remember too much from the supporting characters. I remember there was some person after his son or so, and I can't remember anything about the characters. But what I do remember is part one, taking more, standard like horror approach, and then where episode 2 happens, it gets very psychedelic. It does, and very weird, strange, and that's it is quite odd. I would say I like it, but it does get a bit too weird. You think, this might be going a bit too far for John Dorney, but that's my personal opinion. He's still a great writer, and I still like the story, but it's definitely not one of his best Doctor Who stories. But yeah, I would say it's enjoyable nonetheless.
For me, The Crooked Man Part 1 is traditional horror stuff what goes on. It sort of reminds me of Chimes in a way, with this policeman being forced with all these book pages down like plum pudding. It sort of reminds me of that, really. I think that the setting's fantastic. With this sort of spindly creature just lurking. I think The Crooked Man could have been made a bit more creepier. I mean, I know they said in the script they've toned him back a bit, but I think it would have been nice to have seen the full wrath of the Crooked Man. I think part 2 is a unique idea, going back to the land of fiction, and if the land of fiction was bursting, these creatures would burst out, and obviously we've got obscure characters, but I don't think that it really works. It sounds like a really good idea as I say it now, but when you listen to it, it's not well executed. So it's one of those stories where you think good idea on paper, but when it comes to the final product, not very good. But definitely check it out for part 1 because it's really, really creepy. And Tom was fantastic in it. Leela's fantastic in it. It's just great, really.
Move on to the next Tom.
Yeah, I might have to continue with the series and then go on to Philip Hinchcliffe to wrap it up.
Yeah. The next Tom is The Darkness of Glass, and I think this is the one I was most eyeing on when all of season 4 was announced. Also with the same with Coitus of Terror, because of course horror is brilliant and just my cup of tea. I would say this one is rather underrated. A lot of people don't really like it and give it like it's an average story. It's nothing fantastic by Justin Richards, but I would disagree. I think it's one of his best Doctor Who stories. I remember part one being quite creepy how this monster is portrayed, like using the shadows to his advantage and it hunts you like that. So I quite like that aspect of Demon. However, it just wasn't. We don't get a lot about the demon. It was just named a demon. We don't know any like back history, like race or whatever. We just only knew that Manu and Caversham just tracked this demon 100 years ago in 1807, I believe, yes. And then 1907 is reaching the 100th anniversary of Manu and Caversham, and these people such as Professor Oliver Mortlake and Joseph Holman, David Lacey are like celebrating the 100th year of Maverick and Caversham. And the atmosphere very feels like horror fan rock, and that is my favourite Doctor Who story, if you know, with the War Games, so love it for that reason. Also got very Talons of Wayne Cheyenne sort of characters, so if you love horror fan rock and Talons of Wayne Cheyenne and put those stories together, then this really should be up your alley. It's a very good story. I just wish the Demon had a little bit more. I would probably give that probably a 9.5 if it did, but I'm going to give it a 9.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. To me, this is my favourite story from the fourth series of Tom's adventures. And like Tom said, I think the demon could have had a bit more of a backstory, but you could understand why that was cut because obviously it only being an hour long, it's understandable why that happened. I mean, this is very much in the same style as the Philip Hinchcliffe story, so it's obviously in the style of gothic horror. It's got isolation. It's just fantastic in it. You know, Tom gets a fantastic one-liner in it, which made me laugh quite a bit. And yeah, it's just quite creepy. And Leela gets quite a bit more to do in this, and she's very prominent in this, and it shows her hunting side of her, hunting this sort of shadow within the story. So it's very good. So I'll give it, like Tom, a 9.
Moving on to Cloisters.
Yeah, go on.
Alright, it's Jonathan Morris, so I was expecting the best because he's my favourite Big Finish writer, but however, it sort of underwhelmed me unfortunately, which is a surprise from Jonathan Morris because I usually expect like 9s out of 10, 10 out of 10s from good old Johnny Morris, as he's just a clever and brilliant writer, but this one he just didn't really do it. But yeah, part 1 is incredible. It's a whopping 10 out of 10 for me. It's just where part 2 it just crumbles, it does, and I hate the direction it takes. But anyway, I'll talk good about it first, the horror stuff in it. It's marvellous. It's got a very creepy concept of these people being taken out in different times in St. Matilda's College, like different people. And I love the atmosphere to it and what happens to the people the last thing they see is this these 3 nuns just staring at them and they say, "Come to us." And they get kidnapped, they do, and if they don't follow, I remember this, I believe I remember this, if they don't follow the nuns, I believe they torment you forever until you actually go to them, so I find that quite a creepy concept, so quite like that. And yeah, the last thing they see is the nuns when they are apparently kidnapped, so yeah, that's definitely great. Yeah, part 1 is perfect, it's just got so many good horror, like atmosphere, suspense, chilling, and also characters. There's one character which I found very chilling, which was Sister Frances Beckett. Very creepy character. You know the direction of her character, I would say, but still a good character nonetheless. And we have the brilliant Rowena Cooper, who plays Emily Shaw, and I fall in love with this character as Liz Shaw's mother, and I want more audios with her. I just fell in love with her, and her and Tom just work so great together, and I just wish for another one. I haven't listened to the last post, but I bet she's just as good in that one as this one. It'd be very nice to hear Liz Shaw and Emily Shaw in that audio together. That'd be definitely a good thing. But yeah, part 2 is where the cookie crumbles. It takes a direction where I hate stuff to go. reminds me of the Stones of Blood a little bit. It's got gothic horror in there, but it has a very lame resolution, and I just hate it when horror stories do that sort of stuff. It really underwhelms me. And this was leading to a 10 out of 10 to a 7 out of 10, unfortunately. Yeah, didn't like the direction Jonathan Morris went with the story, but it's good, but not my favourite out of season 4, unfortunately.
Yeah, like Tom said, part one is fantastic. It starts off rather eerie with these nuns appearing, and obviously it's quite interesting the cliffhanger for it, what happens to Leela in it. It's great. Like Tom said about Emily Shaw, fantastic character. I would love to have a series of just her and Tom because they just bounce off each other brilliantly. And she's brilliant in the last post. And she's such a brilliant character, and it's nice that we've actually got a companion chronicle with her, even though it's Liz Shaw's companion chronicle. Emily's still a very big part of it. I'm going to be honest, I found part 2 a bit predictable with what was happening. The story itself, from reading it, it sounded very much like Eye of the Gorgon. It sort of reminded me of that Sarah Jane adventure, but it's nothing like that. But it is definitely creepy. Part 1 is worth checking out. It's like The Crooked Man. Part 1's fantastic, but when it comes to the second half, it just flops. Not one of Jonathan Morris's best, but still a good effort. It's still one of my favourites. Probably my third favourite from the series, I suppose.
What would you rate it?
Probably an 8, I guess.
You should move on to the big thing now.
Yeah, let's go on to the granddaddy of the Tom Baker era, the Philip.
I'll give you the honour of starting first now.
Yeah,
Sexy
alright.
big box that costs 55 quid.
Now that's the
Five
thing.
bloody pounds.
It's not worth 55 quid, even though I adore the boxer because they're all, near 10 out of 10 stories. Well, one of them is 10 out of 10 for me. And they're just brilliant stories, and they really do reflect the Hinchcliffe era brilliantly.
Oh,
But-
Mark Bass, you sexy man.
But the price
Indeed.
is just not worth 55 quid. If you can get it for 30 quid, then definitely get it because the stories are fantastic. The Ghost of Grelstead is fantastic. It's a bit like Talons of Weng Chiang with this creepy villain called Mordriga?
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting having this sort of freak show because Tom, I think, started in like a freak show thing back in the day. And the one criticism I have with this is that there's this sort of quest about this diamond in it, and then they randomly go to Africa in part 5, which just takes you out of the gothic feel to it. And then part 6, they're back in Grelstead, so it sort of loses that sort of Victorian feel. Like I said, that it has a fantastic imagery. You can easily imagine this story going on with this sort of haunting house and sort of horse walking around in it. And I'm trying to think what the daughter's name is.
Sorry, what are you looking for?
The girl's name who sort of sees the dead thing, Rodrigo or whatever it was. I can't remember her name. But she's a really good character. So yeah, Ghost of Grelstead I'd give a 9 out of 10. I need to re-listen to it again. But I will say the resolution to it isn't as good. It just seems a bit meh, really. It seems a bit Rings of Akaten and dust breathing for me. Now on to my favourite story of Tom Baker, The Devil's Armada. Absolutely fantastic. This is, for me, the Tom Baker audios at their best. I mean, it's just fantastic from what I remember of it. Yeah, it's fantastic. 10 out of 10. I'm rushing these because we've got quite a bit to still cover. So yeah, 10 out of 10. Devil's Armada.
It's pretty interesting, 10 out of 10. That.
Oh, I love it a bit.
It is lovely, Mark Platt and Tom. But anyway, Ghost of Grelstead. Now, I've only listened to these during 2014, so I'm doing this by memory, but I've listened to both these stories twice, and I really do need to re-listen to them. But I remember both these stories being brilliant, just fantastic. You gotta love the Philip Hinchcliffe era, and you should love this box set, absolutely. I would say it would be a great start if you can find the box set for cheap. I would pay £30 for it straight away. That's definitely a good bargain, get it for cheaper, or if you can, I definitely recommend it. But Ghost of Gaustead is, I remember being quite of a creepy story to begin with. It started out with this house, and it was built in there with Mordriga entering the equation. She starts off to be very demonic and very sort of like a feral monster, I would say, and then gradually she changes a little bit to become more of like a standard Doctor Who villain, I would say. But I find her more interesting when she was like in the start of the story, in my opinion, from what I remember. I remember things like I remember like underground places, if I can remember correctly. But I remember it being very under siege in places when they were in the house, and some demonic things happening there with this child, which I cannot remember the name of. But yeah, what Ben brought up, I do agree that it does take out, the creepiness and the atmosphere of what was happening with part 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Then they go into Africa, which completely changes the story. I would still say it's good during part 5, but I'm thinking what was happening there, they could have changed the story where it was actually in London but not in Africa for some weird reason about this sort of like diamond thing or whatever. Yeah, it took the suspense from the story. I didn't hate it, but I think they could have got around it and done something else. And then the end of it, I would say good, could have been better handled, but still I say it's a good story. I give it a 9 out of 10. And then we have The Devil's Armada, and I do love these two covers. Got good old horror fan rock Tom Baker right there, so that's a good sign for me, isn't it?
Oh,
But
Park
yeah,
is brilliant.
yeah. But Devil's Armada, I remember Tom Baker doing a fab performance. I remember he was shouting on the top of his lungs in one of the scenes. I thought, bloody hell, Tom, that is great stuff from you right there. And part one's cliffhanger, I remember being very striking about demons torturing and mentally torturing the Doctor. So I thought, wow, that's pretty big stuff right there. And I remember like it's either part 3 or part 4, this massive like ship battle scene. And I thought, wow, it's just so epic in places, great. And honestly, I don't know which one I prefer, Ghost of Gaustead or The Devil's Armada. I'm completely puzzled. So I need to listen to the set again to confirm that, but they're both really good at 9 out of 10s, and I rate the box set a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, one thing what you sort of reminded me is the sort of confrontation between the main sort of imp in it, sort of devil creature, reminded me much of Sutek and the Doctor. The devil has this
Yeah.
power over the Fourth Doctor. I thought that was a very powerful scene. You can obviously feel the power with these sort of little imps sort of all over the place. There's always sightings in history of devils, and it sort of is a nice little throwback to that, where they sort of how it all began really for me. So that is Tom done, and now we're going to quickly move on to Dark Shadows.
Just a quick thing, do you think they should make a second Hinchcliffe box set?
Well, the thing what I saw on Big Finish listeners is that there is somebody's put Philip Hinchcliffe Presents 2, so whether they are actually doing it, and Tom and Louise are recording something, will have recorded something, so I think that could be the possible thing. Whether it is, we don't know.
So Mr. Hinchcliffe isn't a spent force yet, he's still got ideas up here. So yes, Dark Shadows. Now I don't think we could do a Halloween special without at least a mention of Dark Shadows. Basically, Dark Shadows was a soap opera in the late 1960s, early 1970s in America. So this went out about 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and this was a series that included murder, fraud, and then when we got away from human drama, we started including vampires, werewolves, ghosts, gypsies, time travel, warlocks, parallel universes, demons from the dawn of time, witches, and all sorts of crazy stuff that I wish we had in EastEnders. But oh well. So yeah, it's basically just like a big fun mix of horror, supernatural, drama, romance in just like one big soap opera. Then Big Finish started producing their own series of this back in 2006. So in terms of, not all the stories are entirely horrific or horror based, like the actual series itself, but there are lots of supernatural horror elements in there, like lots of returning characters like David Selby playing Quentin Collins, who is essentially a werewolf, but with the youth of Dorian Gray. So instead of turning into a werewolf, his portrait turns into a werewolf for him. So that's what the series really did. It borrowed lots of supernatural horror classics in a way. So yes, Big Finish started doing their own series. So in terms of recommendations, if you want to start with the full cast stuff, I'd say start at the beginning with The House of Despair. It's a really good introduction to the characters. It introduces you to the town of Collinsport, where it's set. It introduces you to Quentin Collins, introduces you to Angelique the Witch, to Barnabas Collins the Vampire, and basically all these characters that were involved in the new series. So House of Despair is a good start. Also, they released recently Bloodlust, which is the third series of the full cast audios. And I'd say this is also really good jumping on point as well, because it really connects to the dramatic readings range as well. But I'd say if you want to start with Dark Shadows, go with Bloodlust, if I'm perfectly honest, because it's a really good kind of structured as a continuing drama in a way. So there's 13 half-hour episodes. You can download individually if you want to for $2.99, or you can buy the box set. But honestly, I'd say it was a very good place to start, and you'd be really gripped by the drama in this ongoing series. Soon after starting the Forecast series, they started Dramatic Readings, which is essentially the Dark Shadows equivalent of the Companion Chronicles, with two actors from the series kind of telling a story in a way. So I'd say that was a kind of really good dramatic series and tells some really good hour-long stories there. But I'm just going to take a look, just some quick ones to recommend. I'd say, 1 second.
Since you're searching, there was one that Big Finish did recently about it was $2.99 Beyond the Grave. I've heard some good reviews about that. It's a very creepy one.
Well, I was going to come to that. I'll just go in kind of chronological order. So there's one here, The Wicked and the Dead. This one's written by Eric Wallace, and it's essentially a story set in the late 19th century about a man sealed in a room with bricks as a demon basically torments him to kill himself. And it's if you listen to the trailer, it's a really kind of creepy trailer. It's a really dramatic, atmospheric story. So if you like that, that's a good story to start with. Another one I'd say was London's Burning by Joseph Lidster. This includes Quentin Collins, and now Quentin Collins is essentially the Dorian Gray of Dark Shadows. It's basically him having adventures in different time periods. So London's Burning is a really kind of dramatic story with Louise Jameson and David Selby playing Quentin Collins. And this is set during Blitz, during World War II. And it's just a really good story as well, really kind of dramatic supernatural story. Another good standalone, The Blind Painter. That's a good place to start as well. This is basically about a painter who's given the ability to paint all of his paintings turn into real objects. And as you might be able to see from the cover, it includes Nicola Bryant as well, playing a really different part to Perry. I know Tom would see he's got The Creeping Fog, which is a really creepy story. Basically, Quentin Collins is in a museum, and he's basically being stalked by this kind of malevolent fog. And this story also includes Matthew Waterhouse as well. And I know you've listened to that story, Tom.
Yeah, of course.
Another one, this is probably the best starting point for the dramatic readings, is The House by the Sea. And this was my first Dark Shadows audio. And I'd say it stars Colin Baker as the narrator, and it is a really, really good, creepy story. It's basically this character that Colin Baker plays is going to Collinsport, and he's living there for a bit. It's basically how the town of Collinsport torments him, and how the characters and the different spiritual forces torment him. And by the end, it's a really kind of creepy cliffhanger ending. But this also introduces you to the world of Collinsport in a really, really good way through the eyes of a brand new character. So I'd say Colin's fantastic in that story, and if you want to start with Dark Shadows, I'd say The House by the Sea is definitely the right way to go. Brilliant story, and I know you've listened to.
Yeah, I would say it's my out of the two I've listened to, it's definitely my favourite. And
you can't beat that Colin sexiness.
No, 70 minutes of straight Colin sexiness.
Yeah. Another quick recommendations is Speak No Evil, starring Arthur Darvill. This is basically set in the 19th century, and it's Arthur Darvill playing Tad Collins, and he's basically being stalked by this mute clown who's broken into his house. And it's quite an interesting story with Tad Collins being kind of a Scrooge-like character in a way. And now he's basically become a lot friendlier. Now he's met one of the freaks in his freak show circus. So that's a good place to start as well. It's a very standalone story. You don't really need to know anything else about Dark Shadows. The Last Stop, starring Jerry Lacey, written by David Llewellyn. It's a very creepy story. It's a very slow-paced story, but it's quite creepy, with this man trapped on a train with basically the devil as he tries to tempt him to do his bidding, essentially. So it's a really kind of tense and really kind of dramatic story. So you do kind of feel creepiness ramping up in The Last Stop. So that's a very good story. And Jerry Lacey's just a fantastic actor as well. He's brilliantly. He plays Tony Peterson in this story, and he plays him really well. Great story there. And The Haunted Refrain, another Quentin Collins story. So I'd say Quentin is probably the best access point for new Dark Shadows listeners. It's basically a couple move into a house and they discover that Quentin Collins is trapped in a CD with a CD, basically trapped in a gramophone with a bunch of creatures called the Scratches. So that's quite a very character-driven story for Quentin Collins. So I'd say, but there is Beyond the Grave as well. So I'd say Beyond the Grave is actually the Halloween special that was released. So that was also a really good place to start there. So so yeah, that's a really good one. Beyond the Grave is a really good place because it's basically the Ghost Watch.
Yeah.
Well, it's basically Dark Shadow's version of that, and once.
Yeah, that really intrigues me, it does. And the first one you showed me with I believe it was Jerry Lacey, one where he's the demon, like a devil's telling him to kill himself and mentally tormenting him. That one.
The Wicked and the Dead, yeah, that's a
that one.
very creepy story. Again, Jerry Lacey is fantastic in that as well. But yeah, Beyond the Grave is a good place to enter into, because it's basically Ghost Watch in Collinsport, and it's actually done really kind of. It's more in the sound design, and it's really done well by David Darlington. It's really, really creepy. It includes lots of kind of brutal murder and lots of hauntings, and it's just a really well written story, I'd say, really brilliantly done. So yes, in terms of Dark Shadows, that's all I can say. I'd say get it if you like your supernatural and horror. You get into Dark Shadows, definitely. Yes. Anyone have any questions?
It seems like, from the way you described it earlier, it sounds a bit like Carry On Screaming, that sort of vibe to it, in a way.
It's not really as camp as Carry On Screaming, to be honest. It's mad bonkers adventures, but it's taken dead seriously in a way. But in the terms of the actual story they're telling, it's not very serious, if you know what I mean. It's not a pastiche, but it's just quite a lot of madcap adventures with vampires, and I mean there's lots of brutal murders in there, and there's lots of dramatic characters in there. But it's not really a comedy series, if I'm honest. Even though there are elements of humour in there, but I definitely say get it. I mean, the ones I recommended are good entry points for the stories. I mean, as I said, House by the Sea, The Creeping Fog, The Blind Painter is a really interesting story. Anything else?
Do you need to have watched the TV series to be able to understand what's happening in the audios?
I'd say less so when Joseph Lidster took over. When Stuart Manning was the producer, he was really making audios for Dark Shadows fans. When Joseph Lidster took over, he was starting making them more for new listeners. I mean, you'll see as soon as Joseph Lidster took over, he started bringing in established Doctor Who actors like Nicola Bryant, Matthew Waterhouse, Louise Jameson. So he's made them accessible for new listeners because Doctor Who fans will like Dark Shadows because it's like kind of some similar kind of madcap universe in a way. So yeah, maybe the early ones, maybe not, but later on, and definitely with the Quentin stories, are very accessible stories. But most of them you can actually just go into fairly cold.
Right.
Anything else?
It seems quite odd that that's sort of a soap opera when you compare to what we have over here. Drugs.
Yeah. Well, it was very experimental for the time, but considering this went out about 6 o'clock in America on primetime telly, it is kind of mad to imagine this universe is very soap-based. Yeah. So, anything else you want me to move on?
Yeah, you can move on if you want.
Okay. I think a quick thing I will just go through is Sapphire and Steel. Now, I won't say too much about this because Big Finish don't have it anymore, but it's basically the story of two supernatural otherworldly investigators investigating breaks in time. And these breaks in time do cause manifestations of ghosts and evil, malevolent beings. So there are kind of creepy elements to this. I mean, this story, Water Like a Stone, is a very kind of Christmassy, creepy story. There's the story Cruel Immortality, which is set in an old people's home and is based on the whole idea of people dying of old age and maintaining your youth. So I'd say it was quite a creepy series. If you don't really want to try and find them on different sites, I understand that, but they're very dramatic and creepy stories, and obviously they star David Warner and Susanna Harker. I don't see why you wouldn't want to get them. They're just really, really good dramatic stories, the majority of them. It's a shame they were ended prematurely, to be honest. But yeah. Anything about these?
I will say I've been interested in Sapphire and Steel.
Yeah.
Definitely.
There you go. Yeah. I'd say I recommend the TV series as well, but the audios, I'd say, personally, I think they're superior from what I've seen anyway.
Mm. And you got David Warner in there.
Obviously, yeah. And I will talk very briefly about one more thing before I bow out. And that is the drama showcase series, namely the episode In Conversation with an Acid Bath Murderer. So yeah, what makes
the title sounds like a horror one.
Yeah, well, it's not really horror. It's actually the creepiest aspect of this story is the fact that it's based on a real life serial killer. I mean, people might have heard of John George Haig. He was a serial killer who killed people and then disposed of their bodies in acid. So the creepiest aspect of this story is the fact that it's based on basically the autobiography of this murderer. And it's played brilliantly by Nigel Fares. It's written by him and played by him brilliantly. And kind of the sound design of this is made really creepy because it's mainly a monologue by Haig. And Nigel Fares has such a great creepy voice for Haig because he sounds so charming and so urbane, but you know underneath that he is this monster. So it's a really, really creepy story then. I mean, I'd say all the drama showcases were quite good, but this is the creepiest one of them all. But so I'd say definitely get this because it's a really dramatic story and really makes you think about who we share the world with. So, and just really well written, despite the fact that it's based on a real individual. So yeah, I think that's the last of my... Oh no, it isn't. I've just looked up one quick thing. So yes, recently I bought The Omega Factor, which was a series in the late 1970s starring Louise Jameson. So yes, that's another series I quickly have to mention. I've already reviewed that on my channel, so again, if you want a more detailed review, you can watch that. It's basically similar to Night Thoughts in a way. It's set in Scotland, which is the creepiest place in the world, obviously.
Oh, up north is.
Yeah, up north, bloody northerners. So yeah, but in Scotland, it's really kind of well served with all the kind of Scottish accents. Do make all the characters seem a bit creepier. No offense to Scottish people, but I actually like you for that. You do creepy very well. So yes, and the stories in that are actually really kind of adult in their maturity of supernatural. It's very modern supernatural, and in that case, it makes it a lot more mature than other stories might be, like Dark Shadows. This is very mature supernatural stuff, and how these supernatural spiritual elements affect the real world. And Louise Jameson does a great job in this series alongside John Dorney. I mean, there's one story that's set in a church as the church is about to be consumed by a portal to the afterlife. There's another one about a woman being haunted by the spirit of her dead brother who abused her. So there's really all sorts of stuff. And like episode 3, Legion, is a very interesting use of the idea of exorcism. So yeah, it's a really, really mature supernatural series, I'd say. So if you want something a bit more mature and a bit more gritty and a bit more realistic, Omega Factor is definitely the way to go. Anyone interested?
Yeah, I am. I have no idea why I didn't get it at Big Finish Day. I think I was distracted by Doctor Who. Yeah, I will get it because it's just stuff I love. The Omega Factor.
Good of it,
So, yeah, I will. watched the TV series as well, and it was good. But yeah, the audio does sound superior.
Yeah. Anyone else interested?
It's been quite interesting.
Maybe
series.
one day.
What was that, Ben?
It does seem quite an interesting series, and obviously they've confirmed series 2 now, I think. So I think that it must be quite a popular range. So I think it's worth checking out just because of that, really.
Yeah. And the good thing is you don't need to watch the TV series to buy Series 1 because it is a jumping on point again. Series 2, I believe, is where they start bringing in elements from the original series. So yeah, the whole idea of this Omega Factor and this organisation called Omega. So I'm looking forward to that. But these first series is mainly just 4 standalone stories, just introducing the concept and the new characters, and reintroducing Louise Jameson as Dr. Anne Reynolds, who does a brilliant job, honestly. Fantastic. I think we're all talked out, to be honest.
Wow, we've done it for a fair bit. We've done our Halloween bonanza.
I never want to talk about Big Finish again.
You barely talked at all. Anything to say,
Just never
Jay?
want to hear about it ever again.
Oh, wait until
How
Monday.
dare you?
Wait to do Coalition Hangout.
Ugh.
Be
You've got-
prepared with the satanic mill. That's all I'm going to say from James.
Yeah.
Prepare for a rant
Oh, yeah.
from all of us, probably.
Right, anyone got anything else to say? Any more things to review? Anything if you mind all the creepy shit out of Big Finish?
Well, we're already half an hour over schedule.
We never go to schedule, that's a thing. I shouldn't even say schedule because it just goes out the window as soon as we start.
There's so much good creepy shit.
I will say this handout has made me look into other ranges and releases like Wicked from the Dead. That really intrigues me. That does. Definitely be my next Dark Shadows on the list would be On the Grave. And also Sherlock Holmes, because I just sounds like my cup of tea and a bit like similarities with Jacob and Lightfoot. So yeah, 2 ranges added I want to look into. Well, I don't know, other Dark Shadows.
I think this started when we started in January when we were talking about what spin-offs would we look at, and it's going to be interesting looking in the years back in January to see whether we stuck to our words, whether we did check them out. So I think
I did mention Dark Shadows, and yeah, I was definitely right.
Awesome.
So yeah, I suppose this is wrapping up time for us because it's past our bedtimes. We all need
And
sleep.
we are very tired.
We are. So
It's not
thank,
Halloween yet.
so thank you very much for watching. We'll see you all tomorrow in the Whovian High Council, where we'll be looking at the dreaded Zygon 2-parter. And should I mention the Whovian High Council single? Should I mention it
Yeah, of course.
for the band?
Oh, go on.
In December, we might be recording a Whovian High Council CD. That'll be fun.
Oh, Lord.
I asked to sing the Gallifreyan Buccaneer.
The album. The
There we are. We've got some exciting things planned, so stick around and watch this space. And Big Finish fans will be returning in November, where we'll be looking at Doom Coalition. Exciting times are ahead. So thank you very much for watching. Sorry about the technical difficulties, and we'll see you next time. So thank you very much for watching. And
Cheerio!